Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. And thanks, everybody, for waking up this morning to talk about the exciting concept of investing in supply chain. A little bit more about my background. I am a native Arkansan, born and raised in Little Rock, Arkansas. Was lucky enough to study at Columbia University, economics and political science. Started my career out in investment banking, doing equity research, covering real estate investment trusts. Then had this bright idea to create an ed tech company and failed beautifully. And so now I have a lot of empathy for entrepreneurs. That's the way I spin it now. And went to business school because I learned, I'm not that great at building a company, but how can I use my skills to actually help founders figure out how to scale their companies? And so that led me into the world of venture capital, where I am today. So the goal of this is to really just give an overview of where the market is today in the global supply chain, what's changed. Before that, I'll introduce you guys just to what is Prologis. It's probably one of the biggest companies that you've never heard of before. And then talk a little bit about some of the investments that we've done before and what we think about the market going forward. I want this, as a speaker, I always love for this to be more interactive than just me standing up here. So if you have questions, feel free. We can just popcorn in this group and then I'll answer any questions. So with that, let's kind of get started on what is Prologis. So Prologis is a public company. It's a real estate investment trust, meaning that most of its core business is buying, selling real estate, and leasing out that real estate for most of his income is leasing out real estate. They're the global leader in industrial real estate. So the company owns about 800 million square feet across 19 countries. And it's the who's who of people who, of customers, is who's who of the global supply chain. So anybody who needs space, whether it's a 3PL like a FedEx or DHL, or if it's a retailer that does its own operations like the big one that's here, or that one that starts with an A in Seattle. Right there. This is just to show kind of the scale of the company as we continue this Prologis commercial. We did some research from a third party to see just what is our kind of global, how much of scale do we have in the entire global supply chain, and about 1.5 trillion of goods go through our buildings. Which is like 2.8% of GDP from those 19 countries. So clearly it's a good time to be in warehousing and distribution centers. Logistics is a growing industry, and we can see this anecdotally from our just everyday lives. Retailers have really changed the consumer perspective on what is table stakes. I remember a couple years ago when 5 to 7 days of shipping was just fine. I order it and it'll eventually come. But now it's my God-given right that I get something in a day for some reason. And so this has had a huge impact on the supply chain. One stat that I found recently was that in 1998, the entire parcel business in the U.S. was about a $5 billion business. That's including B2B and early days of e-commerce. In 2017, just B2C, so e-commerce to direct to the consumer parcel was $40 billion. So just think about the scale and how things are changing. And all while this is going on, and all while in your everyday life, you're seeing, more transparency, customization, speed. But on the back end with logistics, we're still solving things with Excel, duct tape, and bubble gum. And so with that, you're gonna have to change some processes. Some research that our team has done at the company, we've seen that e-commerce is a different animal when it comes to logistics, even in the warehouse operations. You typically need for e-commerce distribution, you typically need 3x the space than a normal kind of brick and mortar if you're just sending to pallets to the brick and mortar. And you need way more labor because you're picking and packing and sending smaller parcel boxes to directly to consumers. So with that, you just need more people, access to people, right? Or solutions that can mitigate that need. With this slide, we're just seeing that within the supply chain, and one reason Prologis is becoming more customer-centric and why we even have a ventures group is to identify what are key pain points for our customer base. So we're seeing that other challenges outside of just our rent make up a lot more of the costs when it comes to the operations. So transportation is a huge problem. One use case is, thinking about all the trucks that are coming in and out of a distribution center. There isn't an equivalent to an air traffic control. So a lot of times through delays and lack of transparency, maybe you have 10 trucks come at once at one dock door, and that leads to this issue of dwell time. Now, that cost of a truck sitting idle to pick up or to drop off a container, it's been estimated that the cost is about 4 billion to 25 billion to the entire industry. So that's just an inefficiency. That's something that we believe technology can help solve. So these are things that are going on and being passed down either to the consumer or it's a cost that someone within the supply chain just has to eat. Let's get this. And we also have from a macro level just the evolution of what creates more efficiency within the supply chain. In 1980s, it was about finding, cheaper labor and, moving offshore and this idea of globalization. And that was because consumers wanted lower costs. Then we started seeing the 1990s, a proliferation of SKUs and more, customers wanted more and more things to customize within SKUs. So that led to a need for using big data to understand where customers' preferences are going. And then we've seen in this current decade just a need for speed, right? Faster, quicker, now, cheaper. So you're seeing that with need for last mile delivery solutions and technology that'll solve that. So where does that leave a sleepy real estate company, right? That leases out 4 walls and a roof. That leads them to become more customer-centric and creating a venture capital group. So Prologis Ventures was created in 2016 with the goal of investing in new technologies that would help customers solve their global supply chain issues. And also drive deeper relationships with our customer base. And this is a part of a whole, I don't know how many prongs now, but a multi-pronged strategy of having a deeper relationship with our customers. One other thing that we have is we have not only our global customer solutions group that works with a ton of other of our largest customers, but we also have a lab. So a customer doesn't have to stop operations to test out a new technology, whether it's an autonomous forklift or it's a transportation technology. They can actually test out it at our test space in the Bay Area. So when looking at what we actually look for and the types of companies that we invest in, we see it as we invest in the future of commerce and commerce infrastructure. And what does that kind of jargony word actually mean? We invest in enterprise solutions and technology that enhance operations within the global supply chain. So whether it's the built environment, that's real estate tech, that's looking at the or real estate tech and construction tech of how Prologis can become a better operator of real estate and other real estate companies can become better operators. Second is digital buildings, which is, in a better word, is industrial IoT. So we see connected devices happening in our own lives as a consumer, but when we have connected devices within a warehouse to make the warehouse operations more efficient, what does that look like? And how do we essentially turn these dumb buildings into intelligent buildings? And then lastly, we look at supply chain and logistics tech, which this conversation is about. And so we look for companies that influence any aspect of the supply chain. If you think of the warehouse as maybe the organs of your body, right? The transportation and getting goods and to and from, whether it's air, rail, maritime, those are the arteries that get the blood vessels to and flow the organs, right? So that's how we look at it, and we look at everything that influences that. And more, this kind of like bottom piece or note on this slide, we're more and more seeing that the consumer really views their entire experience as not only just the value chain that they might see from the retailer or the brand. So whether that's merchandising, marketing, or just building a great product, they don't just see that as their experience. They also see the supply chain. And so where in the past, there was really a wall between what was going on in the retailer, and then they would throw those expectations, the consumer's expectations, to their supply chain partners. They have to have more ownership and be aligned with their supply chain partners because that influences the entire customer experience. And so for that fact, we're starting to look at more retail tech that's B2B that influences the future of inventory. So inventory management, predictive demand are a few areas that we're exploring. So here are a few companies that we've invested in, but let me actually go back. Before that, did anybody have any questions? I can talk more about what types of areas we look for, or I can go deeper on some of these subjects as well. First. About this testing space. What is that? So the question was about the testing space. Prologis Labs is located in the Bay Area, East Bay. And so what we look for is our customer base, which is pretty much anybody who holds inventory. If they have a technology or if we've identified a technology that they're looking to test, one example comes to mind is an autonomous forklift. So we've had different startups that are doing those solutions come test their product out in front of our customer base. So instead of you having to have a test space of your own, here's a way for you to come down to the Bay Area, check it out, do your own test, do your own diligence, but in the comfort of this space. That make sense? Yeah, do you offer that as a value add to these companies to vet them, or do you? Yeah, I mean, selfishly for us, it provides a value to Prologis Corporate's customer base, but then also helps us see if that use case is something that will scale up with these potential customers. So if you do great with that, then of course we probably want to invest in you as well. Yeah. I think, oh, sorry.
So the people that use that come in, you have customers that are coming from around the world, and you said you're in 19 countries.
Yeah.
So from the various countries that have
It's been around for about 2 years. The question is about where are people coming from, and do global customers come? We have had a few global customers come and test from Europe and test out in the Bay Area because we don't have multiple labs yet. Yeah. Yeah. It's the latter. We're facilitating that interaction. So usually we'll identify a startup or a use case that one of our customers is like, hey, we're trying to find X. We'll find a few of those that we think are the top startups in that kind of use case, and then introduce them. And so maybe the customer will come and view, on two separate occasions, view one startup and then view the next one when they come back. So we try to be a connector, essentially. Well, I mean, we have connections with, I don't want to name names because it's like prominent companies in this area, and I'll try to be sensitive to that. But literally everybody you would think of that holds inventory and their competitors use our space. Any other questions before I go on to a few of the startups? Well, we'll say that we also, our criteria, given that we're a corporate VC, is pretty similar to a traditional VC. We look for Series A and up companies, so typically lowest we'll want the company to have 1 million to 3 million in annual revenue run rate, and to have proven at that stage that they have enterprise customers. So not just pilots, but have converted a couple of those pilots to actual annualized contracts. And our diligence process goes along with, we usually have a traditional VC lead the round, and we'll come in as a strategic partner, or strategic investor. So a few companies that we've invested in. So one that's interesting, given that we're a real estate company and deals with supply chain, is the company called Flex in Seattle, Flexe. Flex provides on-demand warehousing. So think about a real bad way to say it is like Airbnb for warehousing. But essentially, it's a business model that we've seen work in consumer, right? So there's an idea that you have all these cars driving, and there's excess capacity and they're going somewhere, so you could probably use them instead of having a fleet, Uber, Lyft, right? That's starting to happen within the supply chain. So prior, in that slide that I was showing you, like how efficiencies and new business models influence the global supply chain, most people felt that to become more efficient, you just need bigger fixed assets. So bigger ships, bigger planes, bigger warehouses. And now we're starting to see the business shift to how can we get to 100% utilization, right? So the way Flex works is they have a software, a warehouse management software that connects with different providers of supply chain operations. So they partner with 3PLs that rent space from a Prologis or one of Prologis' competitors. But maybe they're not hitting 100% utilization. Maybe they only have 50% of utilization within the warehouse. So a way for them to earn more capital, given they have the labor force and the expertise, is to then plug in Flex to then have more customers and more SKUs, right? And so they've created a marketplace on top of this excess space. And they've been able to not only help, this is public so I can say, large enterprises like Walmart, when thinking about seasonally, where do we store SKUs that, when we have the holiday season come in, where do we store other things that aren't going to be really sold during that season? So they help companies like that, but then they help also fast-growing D2C brands have a distributed warehouse system, right? So they can provide same-day delivery no matter where. So think of like Casper's, Allbirds, and other cliches of millennials. So another company that we're really excited about is FreightWaves, which is based in Chattanooga. That company is looking to solve visibility in freight data. And so think about a Bloomberg media data company focused on freight. Historically, you haven't been able to see for one lane, if we're going from Chicago to Little Rock or LA to Little Rock, you're not seeing what does that freight cost? Like historically, where has that been? This company has developed partnerships with different carriers, TMS systems, to aggregate that and creating a Bloomberg-like terminal called Sonar that helps people and shippers actually look up and do figures to help them with spot pricing and get in front of like higher prices or take advantage of lower prices. They're also developing a futures market, which will be the first of its kind, and they're growing really, really fast. The last one that I'll talk about on this slide would be, there's a lot of good ones, but Airspace Technologies out of San Diego. Historically, we've always thought that supply chain, well, not historically, but recent thought, general thought is that air freight is out of the supply chain. It's too expensive, and nobody really wants to do it. But historically, there's always been time-critical delivery that needs to be done. And it's very, very archaic in how the operations are executed. So if let's say I'm a donor network, organ donor network, I've always usually had to call FedEx and say, hey, I can't do the next day flight this is on your planes. I need next flight out to this location. So usually I would have to call a carrier that does this and has tarmac clearance. I would have to call that from the starting point, origin point. I have to call them, tell them where to pick it up. Then I would have to call the airline, see who has open freight for commercial flights. And then I would have to call the destination, a carrier to pick it up. All phone calls, no visibility. So if a flight is delayed, my carrier on the other end of the actual destination doesn't know. Airspace has created a platform that integrates with airlines, and they have a proprietary network of third-party carriers that all have tarmac clearance to optimize this process. And they're growing like gangbusters because every 3PL needs this. And so these are just examples with all of those companies that I just mentioned where our customer base needs solutions like this. And that's one of the reasons we've invested. On this last slide, there are two companies that I'll highlight. One is Wise Systems, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Wise is a last mile route optimization platform. So they don't actually do the last mile execution, but for anybody who has fleets, and a lot of companies are having a lot of different fleets, no matter if it's trucks or small vans, especially as we have last mile delivery, even smaller cars to do deliveries. There aren't any kind of software solutions to help combined data for like traffic and weather and any other things that could delay in historical drop-offs, and what Wise coined the tribal knowledge of the actual drivers, right? So just because UPS has a system called Orion that has historically helped for like route planning, but drivers have become smart and actually understand what's going on, and so they only have to do the first and last drop-off, right, to actually get cleared off. They usually do whatever they want in the middle. Wise dynamically change routes based on decisions that the drivers made. So why didn't you drop off at that location? And using that data to empower the algorithm to make smarter and smarter recommendations going forward. Second is WorkStep. If you look at a key problem in the supply chain, it's finding labor. With peak points, whether it's a made-up holiday from that company in Seattle, or if it's the actual holiday season, for picking and packing, you have ebbs and flows where you need a lot of labor to do that. And so this company actually uses data to help companies find proven labor that has done this work before at a faster speed and a lower cost than what the legacy staffing agencies that are being used around the country. So that is something that's directly helping our customer base make decisions on where to locate their warehouses and how to find labor in the toughest periods of time. So that's the end of my slides, but I'll answer any more questions on on whatever people want to talk about when it comes to supply chain. I could talk about it forever, so.
Ernest, what's it like with having Prologis as a corporation being a funding arm versus a traditional VC?
Yeah. The question was, what's it like having a corporate LP and partner that provides our backing in comparison to traditional VC? It's great because it provides us with a foundation of value. You know, I talk to a lot of friends that are traditional VCs, and coming up with your brand of what actual value you'll bring is a little tough. But with us, knowing our brand in the industry, and then just looking at our top 50 customer lists, it shows the value there. And what we try to do is we take it seriously and not over-promising. And so making sure we have the right relationships prior in our diligence and have a clear understanding of what the company is looking for. The question was on, during our diligence, what kind of growth prospects are we looking for? We're looking for venture, growth. So high speed within 5 to 7 years, getting as big as possible, $500 million and more. And so it's hard to sometimes see that, but you want to understand where the company is and what their vision is. And so, that's where we really lean on the rest of the corporation and their knowledge of the industry, and then also our relationships with our customer base to see, is it really a pain point that people are looking to solve today and grow with in the future? Because a lot of times we see just very tech, a lot of tech expertise with companies without the industry knowledge, and I think you have to have both because the sales cycles are so long and people want to know that you understand their business. And sometimes that's not giving them the 10-year vision, but what's the 18-month vision to help them grow into the 10-year vision.
Where are the gaps? Where are you not seeing companies that you'd like to see, like the problems that aren't being solved?
Great question. Question was on where are we seeing gaps within the supply chain that aren't being solved. So a few use cases come to mind. One is, I don't think last mile has been solved at all. It costs a lot. And we're at this weird point where consumers are just not reasonable, right? So and I'm one of them. We want things fast, but cheap or free. Actually, we can just stop there. That's actually the problem, right? And so you're seeing a lot of companies like Walmart test out where to having different options, whether it's having the ability to pick up or testing out. I think I even tested out with some rovers, or maybe that was someone else. But it hasn't been solved, and there's a reason why highly capitalized last mile providers of food haven't gotten into parcel. Because when Ernest orders a burrito, he's probably gonna be there at home. There's a chance if I order a sweater, I'm not gonna be home. And so the cost of it being stolen, the cost of having to take it back to the distribution center and then resend it to me, that triples the cost on the legs. So it just hasn't been solved yet. Another one is reverse logistics. Like, I've seen some different strategies on how to aggregate packages. So there are a few companies that do that for retailers. And then they're able to kind of give the money back quicker to the consumer and then quickly see where the value is and then if they can put it back into the resale market. I've also seen companies try to use data. So I anticipate if Ernest always orders 3 of something, and let's say sweaters again, right? And he feels really aspirational one day and orders a medium and then 2 XLs, he's probably gonna return that medium, right? So putting that factor using data and kind of creating a similar, equivalent would be like a return credit score on every consumer and pricing that in to the shipping. So then that's one way you get in front of it. But nothing has really took off yet. And then other gaps are just systems, platforms that can connect all data. We're starting to see a lot of, and I believe Tommy's speaking later, of solutions in different nodes be able to get more precise transparency data, whether it's tracking where every truck is, but connecting the entire supply chain of where every plane is, to where every truck is, to where every container is, to where every SKU in that container is. We haven't got to that level of specificity or standardized nomenclature because every carrier names something different. Delivery might be a final destination, might be something else. So that's where we need to see more uniformity, and some solutions could help with that. Anything else? Yeah, we're starting to see there's some companies, like I was saying, that take on the aggregation because it's a lot of effort. There have been stories out that some e-commerce providers just say, keep it. We've all been there, right? We've ordered for something and they just say, don't worry about it, keep it. And there's lost value there. There can't be there has to be residual value. And we're starting to see in other markets for millennials and Gen Z, we find value. It's not taboo to own something that's already been pre-owned by somebody, right? With the Real, Poshmark, those markets growing. And actually brands are becoming more up to speed on that as well in apparel and having to break their paradigm of thinking that these could cannibalize, having a secondary market could cannibalize their future sales. We've actually invested in a company called Ecommerce that actually does this for brands so they can maintain some value. So if you own any Patagonia or REI, you'll probably start to see some programs or some marketing on returning your Patagonia vest, and it'll be resold to someone else, and you'll get points for a new vest or any type of apparel. So companies are starting to see the value in that, and that's kind of around the theme of returns and sustainability. But I just on new purchases that people are just testing out stuff and give back, most of that is unfortunately is seen as waste. And it hasn't been a lot of solutions on how to use data to figure out, hey, if Ernest returns this based on how he treats clothes and all this stuff and what type of clothes is, where can we get immediate value? So, cool. Feel free. Hey, feel free to. That's the benefit. That's the benefit of having a small group. You guys can ask whatever you want.
Would you talk more about BLCKVC? What is that?
Oh, cool. So the question was on Black VC. It's a organization that is geared to increasing the number of Black investors in venture capital. Historically, there hasn't been a large number of general partners who are making writing the checks, like having full decision power and writing checks in venture capital. They've typically been from one demographic, a large lion's share of one demographic. And as we see, even in just changing of consumers and the growth demographics of where our country is going, that we're probably missing out on great entrepreneurs that don't have historically access to the old guard, right, of venture capital. So our goals are to increase the number of GPs. And so just to give an idea of like how it is, there was a study done in about 2016, 2017. In the US, there are roughly 3,000, well, maybe a little bit more, 3,000 investing roles in venture capital. About 1%, pretty sure rounded up, is of African American or African descent. And I believe for Latinx, it was maybe 2%. So with those being the highest growth of new entrepreneurs, and that number being so low, there's kind of a disconnect. And it also explains when those groups don't have historically the way the industry works is getting warm leads and don't have a natural connection, it's harder for those people to get funding. So we're looking first to kind of grow being on a programmatic basis of helping those that are in the industry continue to grow in the industry, and then providing access for people who want to come in the industry, what are the tools, relationships they need to do that. Thanks.
You going out and finding them, or are they mostly finding you?
For that program? They are, we're doing marketing, and our group, since 2018 when it was founded, has grown to probably a membership of about 250 across 4 chapters. We're in Bay Area, LA, Chicago, and New York. And that includes a gamut of not just institutional investors, that's angel investors, people who work at corporate innovation center or innovation groups, and that work at large tech companies, because those are the most likely profiles that'll be able to become GPs. Yeah. Cool. Did you have a question? What's your top one question?
Yeah, so when you talked before about the assignments and how that's becoming a growing area because we're seeing the expand, they don't mind doing things that were done before. How does that work with the companies that do the subscriptions? So, like you can go, I don't know, Stitch or something like that.
Stitch Fix.
You can do a subscription, but then, so you pretty much know that people are going to get a box, they're going to decide what they want to do, and they're going to send things back. So that must have an impact on supply chain where they already know, they don't have to operate them, they just know, they can start estimating what's coming back.
Well, I think those, not knowing, I haven't invested in any of those companies, but just kind of like talking to people in the industry, I think that's becoming more of an issue where they're thinking about their reverse logistics. There has to be a point in a time where even a company like Rent the Runway, there's probably a number based on the fabric, the style, it's people's desire to actually wear that gown or whatever. It's probably a time limit on the actual like item. And so thinking about what to do with it then, I think is the same problem that the subscription boxes have. So if it's been returned a number of times, then okay, where does it go next? I don't think people have solved that yet. It's one of those things where as you accumulate more data, hopefully your data science team or partners, maybe you have a vendor that does that, can help predict what are the best items to continue to purchase and which items to maybe send somewhere else. I don't know, but that's a good question. Cool. Thanks, guys.